Welcome to The Good Old Days, the podcast at the corner of history and true crime. I'm Maggie Coomer.
And I'm Jasmin Brand.
And happy Thanksgiving, Jasmin.
Happy Thanksgiving.
My personal favorite holiday. What about you?
Yeah,
mine Is that your favorite one?
It is. It is. We even celebrated in England, which I'm pretty sure is treason.
Oh my. Well, there's turkey, so yeah. It's okay.
It's not as bad as 4th of July, which we also celebrated.
I mean, we're all cut from the same cloth, yo. Yeah. Did you hear the CDC came out yesterday and recommended that nobody travel? And I guess there was a poll taken, which I don't trust polls really because like your sample size varies. But apparently 75% of Americans are not traveling for Thanksgiving. Way to go. Stay safe out there.
Yeah, I'm not traveling.
I am, but we've all been quarantining for like.
Yeah, you've been preparing for a long time for this.
Yeah, you're the only person who's in my pod besides my husband, so.
Hey, we're in a pod.
We're in a pod. Oh my God. I love it. That's cool. So I think I'm pretty lucky. I think you're lucky too. We both like our families. And so, you know, the holidays aren't necessarily excruciating, but for people who are spending Thanksgiving with family members they only see once or twice a year, it can be pretty taxing. I mean, hell. Spending time with people you like at the holidays with all their unrealistic expectations of joy and peace and happiness can be excruciating as well.
Yeah, it can definitely not go a good way. And especially this year, I think a lot of people are very anxious to spend time with family members who did not vote the same way they did. So that's an anxiety thing. Well,
and also there's such a varying response, I think, to COVID and what families are doing. And I have personal experience with that, with at least one side of my family who I'm pretty sure don't listen to this, so I don't really care. But yeah, I mean, it's really uncomfortable to know if you're being guilted to go to a family function. It's really hard to know that those people don't respect like what scientific authority figures are saying about COVID, and so. You know, you have to walk into this environment knowing that your thoughts and feelings are not going to be respected. Like, that's really hard. And I think that's probably going down for a lot of people, unless you're strong enough and have superhuman strength to say, no, thank you. But yeah, so for anybody who's feeling that, I think a lot of people are feeling that politically with COVID, with everything, like just try to keep it together. I know, Jasmin, you pointed out something about a domestic abuse statistic you saw, right?
Yeah, when I was doing a little bit of research for this, I found a statistic that said there's an increase by at least 20% of cases of domestic abuse and assault, which is not surprising, but it is really tragic. And because of that, I just wanted to throw out a couple of resources. There's a website called thehotline.org that has a chat and different resources there. And there's also a phone number, 1-800-799-SAFE, to call if you need any help.
Yeah, so use those resources. But no matter how your holiday season happens or how your holiday goes, here at the Good Old Days, we hope that you are having a better time than the people in the following story.
Well, and just the turkey that doesn't get pardoned.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget that.
Yeah. So
heartwarming American tradition.
So, yeah, explain that a little bit.
So, since Abraham Lincoln in 1863, the United States has pardoned a turkey on Thanksgiving. And it's just a tradition, I guess, since the 1870s.
Well, if it was Lincoln, it would be the early 60s.
Yes, but since the 1870s, there's been this tradition of someone is nominated to send turkey. So he starts it. And then there's like a turkey farmer that gets nominated. And of course, you know, it's a massive thing.
Sure.
And they get to send
it's
two
a
turkeys.
Huge honor.
Yeah, it's a massive, massive thing. And they get to send 2 turkeys to the White House, and one of them he gets pardoned. And this year they're still doing it. They haven't named the turkeys, which I'm rather upset about. Last year their names were Bread and Butter. I don't know which one got pardoned, but I'm still upset that I don't know what their names are this year.
So who got pardoned, bread or butter?
Let me find out. Hold on. The turkey pardoning. So I'm on the official Turkey Pardoning 2020 WhiteHouse.gov website. And let's see, last year, Butter won. So Butter was pardoned after a vote was taken.
Does anybody really win in this scenario?
No, no, not at all.
This is like PETA's worst nightmare.
Think about this. There's like two turkeys. They're sent across the country together. It's like homeward bound, and then one of them ends up dead.
This is PETA's worst nightmare. This is a sacrificial ceremony of an animal.
Yes, I have lots of things to say about that, but we'll leave it with that.
Man. Anyway.
Yeah, so we came up with this episode because we wanted to talk about Thanksgiving, and not all Thanksgivings are great, and as a lot of people have clashes with their families, we wanted to make sure that you at least had a frame of reference for some worse Thanksgivings that you can listen to maybe on your drive to see your family if you are someone who's traveling, or while you psych yourself up for those virtual dinners over Zoom or whatever you're doing. That's what I'll be doing this year because my family is all in England.
And may you not spill gravy on your keyboard.
Yes, that would be tragic. Tragic. But to get some inspiration, I decided to turn to some children's books, and Maggie and I listened to an audio version of The Littlest Pilgrim.
And talk about unrealistic expectations. So Minnie, the littlest pilgrim, was too little to do any chores around the house, and she meets a little Native American girl who doesn't open her mouth and say anything, but they become friends. And the moral of the story is that even if you're little, you can still make a friend and still spread smallpox to an entire village.
Or just poison her. We don't know what was in those berries.
This is true. This is absolutely true. We don't know Mom and Dad's reaction to her befriending the Native American girl in the woods. We don't know what Brother did with the hatchet. Like, we don't know any of it. Sorry, This is taking a dark turn.
Or Dad with the rope. I mean, as you see, each person in this story has a different weapon. Like Mom with the bread oven.
It's like Pilgrim Clue.
Like a really terrifying version. Like, what about this poor Native American girl's parents? Where are they?
Yeah.
Like, and we don't even know her name. This story doesn't even tell us her name.
The Littlest Pilgrim isn't specifically a Thanksgiving story, but it got us thinking. Most of the stories told to us as kids about the origin of Thanksgiving revolve around a conciliatory feast between pilgrims and native peoples, and often imply a peaceful and prosperous relationship. While there is evidence of a feast at Plymouth Rock in 1621 between pilgrims and the Wampanoag people, that wasn't actually called Thanksgiving. It might surprise you to know that the first officially declared day of Thanksgiving didn't happen until 16 years later, and only after the decimation of an entire tribe of native peoples. So we're going to tell you that story today, and just a heads up, it's grim.
Yes, warning for mass violence, genocide.
Yep.
And just all things that are terrible.
Yep. Description of murder.
Lots of murder.
Yeah.
Literally was ruled a genocide.
Yeah, it resulted in the extinction of an entire tribe. So buckle up, boys and girls. It is time for the story of the Mystic Massacre.
So we're going back to May or possibly June, depending on which calendar you're looking at, of 1637. So a little bit earlier than we celebrate Thanksgiving.
Right. Yeah. And this story takes place near Massachusetts Bay and southeastern Connecticut. Is that right?
Yes, I believe this is near the Mystic River in the Connecticut area. Wherever the Mystic River is in Connecticut.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with that area at all, but it is still there. There's a place called Pequot Hill now, and that's where this would have taken place.
The tribe that we're focusing on, they're called the Pequot tribe.
They're described as a warrior tribe, which this is descriptions from colonizers, so I don't always take those as effective
at face value
because they're trying to wipe them out.
They were really the main obstacle in the way of Puritan expansion into the mainland. So for about a year prior to May 26, 1637, they were at war. It's called the Pequot War. The Pequot leadership had split internally, and a faction had formed called the Mohicans.
Mohegans.
The Mohegans.
Not the Mohegans. Close, though.
Close.
There's the same character from the last of the Mohegans.
Exactly. And this Uncas. Yes.
Yeah. He's a real person.
He is a real person.
Not in that timeline, though. So it's confusing.
Right.
But
it is
anyway,
a little confusing.
I digress.
So the Mohegans, they actually allied with the English, and the Pequots and the English and their allied tribes begin to really cause a lot of problems for each other. Violence on both sides. The English raid Pequot villages all up and down the coast. The Pequots disrupt trade. They end up killing a trader. Tradesman, not a traitor. But tensions escalate until we reach a climactic point of the war of the Pequot tribe. So let's talk about...
Well, and a really important part of the Thanksgiving story, which actually does play into this, is they all came together to share food because the Puritans were fucking stupid and didn't know how to grow their own food.
True.
Yeah, but anyway, that is part of this. But they don't come together to share food. The Puritans, the Pilgrims, steal the food from these villages that they're going into because there was a hurricane and they didn't know how to deal with that kind of weather or have enough food stores. And of course, the Native Americans have always been there, so they had plenty of food stores. And the sharing was not happening. There was issues with trade, but that was one of the contributing factors to this tension that's building.
So we've arrived at the day of the Green Corn Festival. The Pequot tribe, they every year ready their village for something that's also known as the Great Peace Ceremony. And this is essentially a sacred ritual honoring their gods. This is essentially a sacred ritual that honored their gods at the beginning of the harvest. It involved fasting, dancing, and all culminating with a large feast. So peace ceremonies were common among the indigenous tribes in the area. Some even threw in together to share the burden of the festival. On this particular year, however, due to the Pequot War, hundreds of people packed into the Pequot Fort off the Mystic River. It's in modern-day southern Connecticut, ready to forget their troubles and turn their gaze towards the bounty of the harvest. And who can blame them, really? Their troubles were aplenty.
The Pequots' village was organized much like a fort with all of their homes called longhouses grouped together. And longhouses were exactly what they sound like, long houses where several families would live in kind of a community setting in them. And of course, this is going to be safety in numbers. And there were, I think, over 100 warriors from other nations that had shown up this particular year to celebrate with them. And this, as I was reading, goes on for a couple of days. They have to get their ceremony grounds ready. They start fasting. They start doing some of the dance practicing, and everything that goes with that. And they do have this big feast. They have this celebration of peace. And once it's done, of course, they're going to retire to these longhouses to go to sleep. Unfortunately, their slumber would be soon interrupted.
Once the Pequot village went to sleep, the village was surrounded by British and Dutch mercenaries and troops led by Captain John Mason and his underling, Captain John Underhill, along with two allied tribe forces. You have the Mohegans led by Uncas, and then you have...
So he's with the Mohegans too.
Okay.
His name was Wequash Cook.
Okay.
He converts to Christianity.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, because they bring, I want to say about 60 or 70 other Mohegans with them. Mm-hmm. And then there's about 200 from the Narragansett tribe.
Okay. So this is probably a force of like 400 or 500 when it's all said and done.
Yes. Yeah. Because you have anywhere between, I've read 60 to 175 British and Dutch, 60 to 70 Mohegans, and about 200 Narragansett troops, essentially, that show up.
Right. So these troops, they surround the village and block all the exits. And from the accounts of these soldiers, the men, the warriors in the tribe, they came out first to see what was happening. Right? Naturally, they're going
to... They called to them and asked them to come out. And this is actually what had happened to some other tribes. And really the standard procedure here was they would call them out. They would say, you can join us or die. Most of the time, they're going to join them. And that's part of how they get these quote-unquote allies with some of the Native Americans.
Join us or die.
Pretty much. Join or die. But, yeah, so that's typically what happens. These guys are sick of it, though. And I don't even know if they get that choice. I've not found that in any of the record.
Well, they start picking them off one by one as they exit the longhouses. Which I'm like, why do they keep coming outside? So that makes more sense. If they've offered them clemency, like, come on outside, you can join us, we can be allies. We don't really know how this goes down, but what does happen is that they shoot and beat to death all of the men who emerge from their homes. And then inside, the women and children who were huddled in terror, well, their houses were set ablaze. Captain Mason ordered all of the longhouses to be set ablaze.
Well, and how brutal is this? Because I read, so the other captain that's there, Captain Underhill, takes down an account of this, and he says, let me put it in his own words, because it's, I don't even have words. I don't have words, so I'm just going to say it in his.
That's fair.
Yeah. He writes down, Captain Mason, entering into a wigwam, bought out a firebrand after he had wounded many in the house. So those are the women and children. He's hurt them. He's just walked in and hurt them. He then set fire on the west side where he entered. Myself set fire on the south end with a tin of powder. The fires both meeting in the center of the fort and blazed most terribly, and burnt all in the space of half an hour. Many courageous fellows were unwilling to come out, and fought most desperately through the palisades. In regard, the fire burnt their very bowstrings, and so perished valiantly. Mercy they did deserve for their valor. We could have had opportunity to have bestowed it. Many were burnt in the fort, both men, women, and children. Others were forced out and came in troops to the Indians, 20 and 30 at a time, which our soldiers received and entertained with the point of the sword. Down fell men, women, and children. Those that escaped us fell into the hands of the Indians that were in the rear of us. It is reported by themselves that there were about 400 souls in this fort, and not above 5 of them escaped out of our hands.
Wow.
So 5 people. And I read another account that said they took about 14 women and children as slaves, enslaved them, and sold them
in the West Indies, probably. Yeah. So isn't this a happy tradition? Just kidding.
Well, they're pretty proud of it because they go and, have their Thanksgiving the very next day.
Well, they first load the food and supplies into wagons and take them back to the colony. And then who was the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony? Who was this bozo? John Winthrop Jr. declared the next day a day of Thanksgiving, and they feasted to celebrate their victory. He said, quote, "They gave thanks to their God who laughed at his enemies and the enemies of his people to scorn, making the Pequot fort as a fiery oven, and thus did the Lord judge among the heathen." So these types of massacres, well, they became commonplace and increasingly brutal, right?
Yeah, and in the eyes of the Puritans here, to be burned and to not have a body to lay to rest was, devastating.
It meant killed your soul,
yes,
right?
Yeah, it was
Purgatory.
Some sort of destruction of essentially your afterlife as well as your present life or your life on earth. However, I'm not an expert on this, but that's part of the reason they burned witches too. So there's this idea that if you're burning them, so they're burning women and children, and essentially in their minds they have condemned them to a terrible afterlife as well as obviously a horrible death.
Man, that just can't, it's not enough just to take their lives. You gotta fuck them in the afterlife too, you know? I hate that.
Well, and that was part of their strategy because they didn't want to come up against the warriors. In fact, it was John Mason, Captain John Mason, who writes at a later time that part of his strategy was to attack those that were unarmed and that he perceived as weaker.
Yeah, Cortez. These are Cortez tactics where it's like, it's basically a scorched earth policy where you terrorize the women and children, the non-combatants, the innocents, in an attempt to strike fear into the community as a whole. And this is very effective. Man, Cortez was like a super evil dude. I mean, really evil. Like, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I mean, just it sends shivers down my spine to read about what that man perpetrated on so many people, so much suffering, so much death.
Yeah, it's millions upon millions of people were impacted by his actions.
Christopher Columbus was no better.
No, he was
enslaving young indigenous women as sex slaves. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't get into that because I have no context or proof or anything or any sources.
There's plenty of proof.
No. I'm at my hands. Yeah. I'm just like talking out of my butt.
We were reading that Howard Zinn book, A People's History of the United States, earlier. And what we're seeing happen here is what's happened for 200 years by this point in what would become the United States, in the Americas. And part of that was Columbus. He shows up to these various different islands, so Haiti, Cuba, those sorts of places, and there'll be a thriving population there. And by the time he leaves, they're lucky if there's a few hundred people left, if any one at all. And
the Pequots are completely wiped out after this. Like, this is a complete and total annihilation of an entire tribe, an entire sect of people gone.
Yeah, and I think at the time that he wrote this, because Howard Zinn talks about this too, in 1972, there was something like 21 or 22, it wasn't very many, it was in the low 20s of the amount of Pequots that were still around. And that was probably from the people who managed to escape that night, or escape some of these massacres. And these would continue on. And after every single massacre, it became pretty common to have a day of feasting and Thanksgiving to thank the Puritan God for helping them defeat their enemy.
Yeah.
And that is where this tradition comes from. In the United States, it was a day to celebrate their victory over...
It's a day to say, better you than me.
Yes. Yeah, as they eat their food.
Right.
And use their supplies.
It's kind of gross.
It is. It's really gross.
And it's kind of gross that it's still one of my favorite holidays, because I'm like, that's not... I mean, obviously it's different in today's context, but it's a remnant of a very ugly, tragic
genocide before you have your Thanksgiving dinner. It's a really dark joke. Don't do that. Maybe we should cut that.
No, I think that's fair.
But are you?
What, did you say something that was untrue?
No,
you didn't. And I don't. If anybody faults you for saying that, I'm sorry.
But that's where this comes from. Is we have a celebration of genocide essentially happening every time it happens, because the elimination of these tribes mean that the colonies can expand. They can move westward. They can take more land. They can do what they want with it, and they don't have to be bothered with the people who live there.
Well, I mean, by removing the Pequots, their biggest obstacle, the Puritans have complete control of the area after this. This is it. This is a turning point. This is a pivotal moment, and expansion is imminent after that.
And as we were talking about Columbus, this is his tactic. So he develops Cortez's tactic, and I can't remember, I think it was one of the captains of one of the other ships records what's happening in that quote-unquote discovery of America, which wasn't really the discovery of America, but anyway, his exploits in the Americas. And the entire group, those 3 ships, they're all told, we can't live with them, we can't enslave them, we have to kill them. So this is the tactic that then is going to follow colonies and colonizers around. And that's what we're seeing here. I mean,
it's the view that it is your duty to civilize any land that you plant your flag on. But you have to civilize it, apparently.
It goes beyond that, because this is from Columbus, the belief. So in the late 1400s, the belief that
they're not even civilized. You can't even civilize them. You just need to wipe them out, because you can't do anything with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty fucked up.
My personal theory on this is because a lot of Native American tribes were matriarchal. I think they couldn't figure it out. Can't figure out a woman-led society with matrilineal lines
Yeah.
versus their patriarchy. But that's just my personal modern day 21st century views, I suppose, imposed on that. But
I'd like to, I would really like a comprehensive book. I would like to find a comprehensive book that really explains the leadership structures of, like, you know,
it depends.
The most common Native American tribes, the ones that we know about, I guess.
Yeah, my understanding, because I've studied a little bit of the Indian removal acts. So when we get to Andrew Jackson, I don't know why I was going to say Johnson. That's not the right president.
No.
Andrew Jackson. And there was a big issue with some of those, like, sit downs, because the women were supposed to be present because they were the elders in society. They were the ones who made all the decisions. And of course, Andrew Jackson isn't sitting down with 7 women to discuss boundaries. Like, that just is beyond his comprehension of why would you do that. And that causes massive issues. But
do you ever think about how everything that we're sitting on, everything that we're touching, we benefit from this, that we've benefited from the actions that were taken? Absolutely.
I know I do. And to try and explain that to some people is really, really difficult. But
it's such a hard thing to think about, you know, because it's like every joy that I have, everything that goes right in my life, like the foundation, the reason that I'm here right now is because of these horrific actions that took place to dominate this continent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reason that we're here is because of what took place.
Right. So it's like,
because otherwise we wouldn't be here. My family, I mean, I would be in
a conundrum, man.
Germany somewhere, or England, and we would never be here. And that's how, honestly, it should have been. I mean, there's a lot of these people, as they're literally slaughtering the native people, are like, oh, this is heaven on earth. Let's take it for ourselves. But then it's not heaven on earth when you move your own shit in. Like, it doesn't work like that. So they are fully aware of the complex society and everything that's going on. It's not just, oh, they're heathens, let's kill them. I think a lot of people understood what made these tribes and how they operated and how it worked and how great it was. And I don't know if they were scared of it. I don't know if it was, I want to take that for myself. I don't know what all of the motivations were, and I'm sure everyone had different ones, but
I'm sure it's a combination. But I think I just watched your point of view evolve before my very eyes, because a few minutes ago you were like, I just don't think they could understand or wrap their brain around a matrilineal society. And I think it evolved, and you're like, wait, you know what? I think it was pretty easy to understand. I think it's that they didn't like it and they wanted to take it for themselves.
There we go.
There you go.
Evolution on the good old days.
Love it.
Yeah, no, I think it was a combination, though. Like, really thinking about it, I think some people really knew it, and those people that are writing about how this is heaven on earth, but then there's a fear there, and I think for everyone there's a fear. And we talked about this earlier, how certain brains work in a certain way and have a bigger reaction to fear stimulus than others.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating stuff to think about. But yeah, I definitely I'm on the hunt. I want some comprehensive, credible work to teach me about the intricacies of Native American society. Because, I mean, we can't speak in generalities. We have been, but it's not correct. Like, we're not even scratching the surface of how complex and different from tribe to tribe.
Well, in the evolution of that. So how some of the biggest tribes that are operating in 1500 are going to be different from 1550 and 1600. And unfortunately, all of the records that we have on this are from the colonizer. So from the Spanish, the English, the Dutch.
From the perspective of the conqueror. So when it's that perspective, it's exactly that Napoleon quote that you posted today, right? So it's
history is a set of lies agreed upon
by the victors. You know, I mean, that truly is a tale as old as time. I think I've said that in almost every single episode. A tale as old as time.
That's what we're here to do.
Do.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, we're here because of this, but it's atrocious.
Well, yeah. And I think it's just, you know, like, I think for a lot of people that thought would be very distressing, but you just have to accept it and learn about it. I think that's the biggest way to honor the fallen, is
Well,
to
and I
learn.
think, I think let it be distressing. Let it stress you out. Let it be distressing. So the next time you try and tell someone that you don't have white privilege, or that you don't believe that it exists, or you can't understand their perspective as a person of color, or as a Native person, you have that reaction, that twinge of guilt, or whatever it might be. And I'm not saying be guilty over a past you weren't present for, but understand that you have benefited from this.
Right.
I did not expect this to evolve into a discussion on white privilege, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And we can sit around the table with our families, even if we're fighting over the election and COVID, but we're able to sit there with our families because this happened.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Wow. Powerful ending there.
Deep stuff.
Deep stuff.
Well, and we're not quite done yet. We're not quite done with the, do we want to go into where we get our modern...
Yeah, let's do it. Jump in.
So Thanksgiving, before before the United States was the United States, was essentially a celebration of victory and genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And this is revived when the United States becomes official. George Washington will declare a day to celebrate Thanksgiving and prayer. And that'll carry on until Thomas Jefferson decides that it goes against the separation of church and state that the United States stands for. So he puts an end to it.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I mean,
if the whole point was to promote prayer, then yeah. And it's a national holiday. There's a little bit of a sticky conflict of interest there. That is definitely not separation of church and state.
Slightly awkward. So he puts an end to it. And then, of course, as we come full circle back to Abraham Lincoln.
Some real quick aside, I watched Hamilton yesterday on Disney Plus for the very first time. And the guy who plays Thomas Jefferson is really good. Like, he really good. I think you're the last person to ever who hasn't seen Hamilton
on the planet.
I was gonna say I was like, wait, no, I'm talking to someone who hasn't seen it either. Good flick. I gotta say, it kind of lives up to the hype. I'm not a big musical person. They really make me cringe, especially when it's sing talking.
Oh God, no.
I picked up this cup and I took a sip and then I threw it at the wall and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. Anyway, but yeah, it holds up. Sorry. Okay. So we come back to Abraham Lincoln.
So full circle
Abe.
From where we started this episode. And yeah, he declares in 1863, following Gettysburg, that they should
the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah, they should do some Thanksgiving things because, it's a shit show and they need some cheering up.
And everything sucks. Everyone's dying.
And honestly, there's no more appropriate time.
Everything sucks. Everyone's dying.
It's like, yeah, this is exactly where Thanksgiving came from.
And what about 2020?
2020
sucks and everyone's dying.
Yeah. So Thanksgiving is, I guess, there's still terrible genocide happening in the world today.
Did you write boo after Thomas Jefferson? Thomas Jefferson disagreed with this. He firmly believed in separation of church and state and put a stop to the celebrations. Boo.
I'm just not a big Thomas Jefferson fan.
That's fine.
So everything he does is layered with just bad things for me.
Get off the stage.
I don't know if you get this question a lot, but I get it all the time of who my favorite president is, and I honestly can't answer because they're all trash.
Asked me that. Who is asking you that all the time?
I just when I tell people I'm a historian, they're like, "Oh, who's your favorite president?" I'm like, "They're all trash, all of them."
Okay. Oh, that's a really good question. I think my favorite president,
not to diminish the United States as a whole and all of its institutions, but they all have not great qualities.
Right. Well, it's the human error and the human element. There will always be major, major imperfections. We can't escape it. There it is. But my favorite president is, I'm going to go with probably GW, just because he set that eight-year term rule, and to give up power, I think he didn't have to. He was immensely popular. He could have ruled like Napoleon until the day he died, but he didn't. And even for all his flaws, he knew, and he was strong enough to hand that torch, which started a really good tradition of changing. We have I read somewhere, it was a great quote. I really wish I could think of who it was, but it was like, we have a revolution every 4 years. Mm-hmm. We do. Yeah. We overthrow our government every 4 years. Kind of, but you know what I mean? Like, well, unless you look at Mitch McConnell, I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, that is amazing. We have a revolution every 4 years, and no, aside from FDR, right, who decided that, I need to.
Well, that's when they said it officially, right?
Yeah.
It was like,
well, because they're like, oh shit, see, not everyone's gonna concede power when we think they should.
So we probably need should.
So we should definitely have protections in place in case somebody gets a little wild and doesn't want to leave. So, that's why I would say he's probably my favorite president, just because of that. He set us up, I think, as best as we possibly could.
See, and I think like each president, as you go through their presidencies, have points like that are super honorable and like have made us the country we are. So when I'm saying like all of our presidents are trash, that's not exactly what I mean. But there's no like one person. Like, I know a lot of people pick Abraham Lincoln and they're like, he was the greatest president we ever had. I'm like, yeah, but he was also a raging racist. So there are issues.
Sure. This took a wild turn.
It did.
We've gone completely off the rails. So back to the horrific first Thanksgiving.
Yes, the horrific. Well, we've done the horrific.
We've done the horrific Thanksgiving, but that's it. That's where we're at. So we hope that you have a good and thankful day with your family, and let's just bow our heads maybe for those who've fallen.
Yeah, and I think for me, because I knew this story, not in the detail that I now do, but I knew this was definitely a part of Thanksgiving. And so for me, Thanksgiving now is about being thankful for what we have currently.
It's evolved into a nice tradition.
Yes.
Out of something that was pretty terrible.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so I think it's important to, again, remember why we are celebrating this holiday and where that came from, but also we can be thankful and we can have a nice day. And I think especially this year, we need to have a little bit of that.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree.
Yeah. Remember what we're thankful for.
Okay. Name one thing that you're thankful for.
One thing I'm thankful for. Well, I am thankful that I have had the ability to, get furloughed and fired and explore some of my passions, and that I can be sitting here with you right now.
Hey, that's a good thing. That is really good. I'm thankful for all the amazing people in my life. Like, I've got a really good significant other. I have really good friends. I have a really great business partner. It's just the people around me are so good now, and it's just that makes me thankful, because you are who you spend time with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's been, this year has been trash.
Yeah.
Honestly. There's been a lot of good things, I think, for us especially. We've done a lot of good things, but
this has been the best year of my life and the worst year of my life simultaneously. Well, folks, happy Thanksgiving. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I want you to head to your favorite podcast platform and leave us a 5-star review. Also, you can visit our website at thegoodoldayspod.com. And Jasmin, what about social stuff?
Social stuff, so you can find us on Twitter at The Good OD Pod, and you can find us on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at The Good Old Days Pod.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy your week. Goodbye.
Bye.